So does anyone ever think about how some franchises should just be more successful than they are now? Especially when the same franchise has left a huge impact on the industry? Look at Pac-Man, for example. The original arcade game was a big success for Midway and Namco back in 1980 and up to today. But you look at Pac-Man's state over the past 4 decades, Jesus Christ, they really did my man dirty here. Story for a different day, I guess. In fact, many arcade games have had a strong identity back then, but they rarely get as much love from their owners nowadays. And when they do, they don't exactly uphold their legacy. Ugh. But when it comes to neglecting franchises, nobody does that better than Nintendo themselves. You could have a day-long conversation with fans at how they want certain series to become larger, like F-Zero, Star Fox, Star Tropics for the 2 people who care about that one. And even franchises that are getting a strong chance nowadays, like Metroid and Pikmin, could have a better chance to get to so many more people, including myself. Please be good. Oh God, please be good. Everything is riding on you. But if I have to put a ticket in the conversation, I have to say the franchise that needs far more love than it currently gets is Donkey Kong. For a franchise that basically saved the company back in 1981, you might be wondering where I'm coming from. But if I asked you for a list of games from the series, you might only get around 15 or so, which is really surprising for a nearly 45-year-old franchise. And not every game is considered great in terms of critical response or, more importantly, sales and impact. And the franchise actually had 2 separate droughts as well, with the second one still going on at this very moment. And yet, the franchise that spawned from Donkey Kong is living it up with multiple critically acclaimed hits, a flurry of spin-offs, and even franchises that spun off from that spin-off. So why? Why isn't Donkey Kong a big success like it was decades ago? And why isn't it as successful as the red and blue leech the Big N keeps treating like a spoiled child? That's what I want to answer today, because I do believe it should be bigger than the Super Mario series for multiple reasons. So with that said, let's start yapping with the one and only Donkey Kong. While Donkey Kong wasn't the first arcade game Nintendo released, not even close, it was certainly their most important. After several failures, it was Donkey Kong that put them on the map, with it having a story, albeit a pretty simple one, and the ability to jump in a platform game, as far as I researched. Though I guess in hindsight it was Jump Bug that did it first? It was released a month earlier, it's not really that important. The game is about a carpenter named Mario Jumpman, who was trying to save his girlfriend Pauline from the titular Donkey Kong. Though this game was actually supposed to be about Popeye saving olive oil from Bluto, though they never secured the Popeye license, so they went with a giant ape kidnapping a woman. Oh shit. Yeah, King Kong was certainly an influence, as well as the story of Beauty and the Beast, surprisingly. But Universal thought they took too much influence, so they tried to sue Nintendo's ass. To no avail. They failed spectacularly, since Universal themselves said it fell into the public domain in the past. Way to go, dipshits. Also, at the time of this game's release, the last King Kong movie was actually published by Paramount, so that makes this lawsuit even dumber. Now, I did play this game once on a family trip in 2009, when we stopped at a laundromat in Illinois. And since I played a lot of Donkey Kong Country as a kid, I was very enamored with the name and asked my dad for a few quarters to play it. But after a couple of rounds... yeah, I was having none of it. It was far too difficult for me, with the seemingly random nature of the barrels being a main culprit. As a 13-year-old, it was absurd design to me. But nowadays, I can cheese the system a little bit. Like, sure, the game can be an ass at points, like the dickhead spring in 75 meters, or these godforsaken fireballs reproducing like bunnies in 100 meters. The level design overall is decent. It's Jumpman himself that has the game's majority of issues. For someone with the name of Jumpman, he doesn't jump that high, which is an issue when you find yourself in front of a line of barrels like this. Yeah, that's perfectly fair. There are those hammers you can use, but they lock your jumping, which kinda defeats the purpose of getting to the giant primeape in the first place, and it lasts a bit too long to make that more frustrating. Also, why does Mario die when he falls a few feet down? I play the Mario games on Super Nintendo so many times, and seeing Mario just plop feels completely off back then and still today. Even with that aside, it's still painful when you just walk off the platform and you're just stuck to your death. And considering all the stages are vertical in their design, death is inevitable. 75 meters most likely, look at all those gaps. Donkey Kong doesn't really feel great in today's gaming climate, but for a 40-year-old game, it's aged better than you'd expect. And you know what? The more you play it, the more fun it actually gets. And with the re-release on the Switch, you can play it as many times as you want without breaking your wallet. Just imagine if a company like EA or Ubisoft was in charge of every arcade re-release. I guess we're living in some sort of good timeline. And you can play the game in the original Japanese version, the original American version, or the reprint that lets you play every level in order instead of playing the first and last stages at the start and adding one more stage for each round. Not even sure why they did that in the first place. But I guess if you're not interested in the prospect of playing the arcade game, the game did find ports on other consoles like the Atari 2600, Intellivision, and the ColecoVision. All of those ports, funnily enough, being done by Coleco. I'm sure there was no foul play happening with that decision. But most people would automatically think about the NES port that was released years later, which you can play on the Nintendo Switch Online service, and this goes for the entire trilogy for the record. And to go a little too far in the scripts, I think these are far easier than their arcade counterparts. Like, the NES version of Donkey Kong has less verticality and thus less platforms to worry about. It also lacks a pie level, but that level doesn't really add anything to the experience, so whatever. But because of all that, the NES port is the lesser version of Donkey Kong, so if you want the authentic experience, buy the arcade re-release. It's not that expensive, all things considered, and don't worry, this is the only time I'm going to be recommending the arcade version. You might be wondering what I think of Donkey Kong Jr. and Donkey Kong 3 when I'm saying that. Well, for starters, with Donkey Kong Jr., I can't say it's much of an improvement. When I first played the game, it was with the NES version on my 3DS, all hail the Ambassador program, and I thought it was perfectly fine. You got to hang on vines, dodge these crocodiles and the weird egg-pooping birds, and you play as the son of Donkey Kong, so you can save your dad from Mario, the only time Mario was actually an antagonist. Yeah, it was fun enough, but I didn't really play it a ton, pretty short for my taste back then. And when I actually played the actual arcade game for the first time, it's kind of a frustrating mess. The levels were crowded with enemies and hazards, to a point where it got incredibly cramped more often than not. Especially with the final level. Jesus Christ. The NES version isn't as taxing, mostly thanks to the system limitations, and since it's also more accessible with NSO, the arcade version isn't something I can recommend. But I guess I can't stop you from trying it out, and it's still a better option than Donkey Kong 3. I only played it on NSO unlike 1 and Junior, because I did enjoy the second one on NES enough to buy the arcade game. And the first one is a classic, that's enough of a reason to buy it. But playing the third one for the first time, I'm not really impressed. Not the least of which because you play as another new face by the name of Stanley. Fucking Stanley. Figure out another name as lame as Stanley, especially compared to something like Mario or Luigi. And the design is about as plain as that name. Nothing about Stanley is remotely interesting, and I have to bring that level of apathy to the game itself. You just shoot the titular character in the butt with a bug sprayer and keep the crops below from being kidnapped by bugs. But don't worry, you won't have to worry about those since busting the monkey's butt to the top can take as little time as 10 seconds. And even less when you get the power-up in the first level. Excellent, now if you don't mind, give us $7 for the same damn shit. Though I guess the $7 are worth it to see Stanley get devoured by a swarm of bees. That's something that happened. This game didn't make nearly as much of a splash compared to the previous two games, despite that interesting design choice. I wonder if it has something to do with the fact that it's not as ambitious as its predecessors, or maybe it was just the lame sequel nobody wanted where you play as a lame-ass bug exterminator. Yeah, I'm blaming it on you, Stanley. Certainly had nothing to do with the year it came out, it was all you! Fuck you, Stanley! Okay, yeah, the real reason might be the fact that nobody wanted to play video games thanks to the video game crash. Though I think the fact that the console versions of Donkey Kong were also kind of a factor, since Coleco made the versions for their competitors purposely garbage to raise their console sales. If you didn't expect that, I don't know what to tell you. But the arcade scene was impacted, if not to the same extent. But I'm not sure how that squares up, considering there was one other game that came out from the same company that made the Donkey Kong trilogy. You may have heard of it. Despite being re-released in 1983, Mario Bros. Was actually highly successful, leading to the Mario franchise to bloom and the Donkey Kong franchise to dwindle and die. Donkey Kong was completely outclassed by a franchise that spun off from it, and that doesn't happen, especially to that magnitude. The only other time I remember this exact scenario happening was with a puzzle series that branched out from an RPG that never escaped Japan. But hey, Nintendo found their golden goose, and they had no intentions of going back. Sure, they released the trilogy on the NES, but that was about it. It's not like they wanted to continue from it, and there's not really any reason to do so. And after the release of Donkey Kong Jr. Math, yes, that does exist, and a few Game & Watches that are completely irrelevant, Donkey Kong just kind of retired. That is until 1994, where they released not one, but 2 Donkey Kong games for that year. The first being a sort of reimagining of the original Donkey Kong game on the Game Boy. The game was mostly made as a demo for the Super Game Boy, with the game having added voice clips as well as 16-bit music, though the latter was only for the credits, and the former only accounts for Pauling sounding like a starving cat. I played this game with EmuDeck, and it stuck with the Game Boy Color version, despite the ROM saying that it's Super Game Boy enhanced. I don't care at the end of the day. All that matters is the game proper, and dude, this might be one of the most addictive games on the Game Boy. Let's start with Mr. Mario Jumpman Mario himself. Not only will he not die at a 6-foot drop, he can actually do handstands, double jumps, and backflips, as well as actually tossing hammers to a higher platform. Makes things a hell of a lot easier and faster. And after the arcade levels, you got access to wires where you can swing and launch into the air, pull and push levers to activate mechanisms, as well as create platforms, ladders, and springs to reach the doors DK and Pauline entered. And that leads to his ability to grab items like the key to said doors, as well as miscellaneous items like barrels for some of the boss fights. Yeah, let's see how you like it, you damn dirty ape. That's a hell of an upgrade, which many of these abilities would go on to both Mario and Donkey Kong for their own respective series. Now with that said, Donkey Kong 94 is more of a puzzle platformer, in contrast to the arcade game being more like an obstacle course. All you're doing throughout this game is finding a way to the key and then taking the key to the door. Not to say that's all you have to worry about. There's still stuff like crushing blocks, instant kill spikes, flowers spitting out seeds, and even this little demon that likes to pull random levers and throw poison mushrooms at you like it's throwing its own feces. Stop that! The enemies aren't much of an obstacle, and many of them don't even hurt you. Some will stop you for a few seconds as an inconvenience so the key can teleport back for some reason. But honestly, the biggest obstacle is still going to be the ground. Since while you won't die as easily as the original arcade game, you could still die from a large enough height, though it feels like it's not the fall itself. Instead, he hits the ground head first, so I assume it's a death by concussion. Exactly why does he fall face first into the ground, though? And you know, if you're not too big into puzzles, the timer might also be a big problem for you. Had me a couple of times, certainly, though for most of the levels they give you more than enough time. I like that how after every few levels, that extra time will actually convert into extra lives. And for some reason, they'll actually give you a freebie for remaining time that doesn't hit 100. Not sure why, this game isn't exactly starving you. This game showers you with lives, whether you find them laying around, or playing these between-level mini-games when you collect all 3 of the accessories from the original game. You're not going to see the game over screen, no matter how good or bad you are. None of this ruins the overall experience, though. It's still an absolutely high-quality game, and I highly encourage you to try it out. Why it's not on the NSO service day 1 is a mystery I'll never understand. Maybe they want the Super Game Boy quality for it, but that's hardly necessary, just give it to us. Everyone should give this a shot if they haven't. You want to know another game you want to try out if you haven't? Okay, there may be a little bit of bias there, but this is a childhood favorite of mine, and I got a lot of memories with this one. Oh man, that hits me right in the childhood. Also, this opening was just crazy to me, and little did I know as a child that this was the original Donkey Kong theme. Even after playing the arcade game, the laundromat was just way too loud. And then... oh man, that was great to see again. Super Mario World may have been the first video game I ever played, and there were plenty of games I played before this one, but Donkey Kong Country was actually the first game I've ever beaten. I played my aunt's copy so many times, just going through every level, finding as many bonus rooms as I could, getting my ass handed to me by the crocs and the wasps and the... what the fuck? But the moment I beat King K. Rool and witnessed the wonderful character parade, I felt absolutely accomplished. Now the question is, how did I finish the game before games like Super Mario World? Well, compared to Super Mario World, it was actually straightforward. If it wasn't for the Forest of Illusion that stumped me, Chocolate Mountain would be the brick wall that would confuse me for weeks. I didn't need to worry about that with Donkey Kong Country. You didn't have to worry about multiple paths or crazy wind conditions. You just needed to beat a stage and move on to the next. Didn't matter if the game itself was much harder than Mario World ever was. The fact that the levels were just easy to understand made it easier to get by. Now, I should talk about the game itself before I get too much into a tangent. By all accounts, this is actually a reboot of the series, with you taking control of Donkey Kong and his best friend, Diddy Kong, who is apparently also his nephew? I don't see it, but alright. And their goal is to take back the banana horde from the crocodile pirates known as the Kremlings. The story is about as simple as you can get, but it's mostly everything around it that makes it kinda nuts. Like, Donkey and Diddy aren't alone in the DK-shaped island. Yes, the island is shaped like his head. It's kinda weird, honestly. You have this bodacious Kong known as Funky, who can take you to any place in the island. There's Candy Kong, DK's love interest, who will save your game. And then there's this old nut named Cranky Kong. He's actually DK's grandfather, who gives hints and tips for levels in the area. He is also, and get this, the original Donkey Kong. Yeah, the Donkey Kong we're playing here is actually Donkey Kong the Third. Whatever happened to Junior, you may be asking? He died. I have no idea what the hell happened to Cranky here. He seems like he got completely malnourished rather than just getting old. Like, seriously, what the hell did you do to him, you malicious mustache? Well, whatever the case, he's too old to do jack shit, so he just harasses his grandson and brags about his past life, the old geezer. Even breaks the fourth wall every now and then, on brand for Rare back in the day. But it's certainly fitting for a character past his prime. Now, the idea of monkeys fighting crocodiles may be random, and I'm sure it is. But I also can't help but wonder if the Kremlings were inspired by those gator things from Donkey Kong Jr. Hell, that's kind of what the Claptrap are. And I think the Zingers, these wasps with spikes, were inspired by the bugs from the third game. It's kind of a stretch, but hey, it's speculation. Now the beavers, armadillos, snakes, and vultures, you got me. Not everything has to be inspired, I guess. Now the reason they're pirates, that's more of a mystery. Though it's worth noting that the Game Boy game actually had a pirate ship level, and Rare could have learned about that through development. Who knows, but what I do know is that they are ugly AF. The game was made with Silicon Graphics computers, meaning the sprites were made with 3D models and they just made compressed images of said models to get around the system limitations. Remember, this was the era of the shitty Genesis add-ons, and Sega were trying to brag that they had better hardware, so Nintendo was like, fuck you, here's our answer to your stupid CD32X or whatever. And the game sold way more than both of those combined. So yeah, Donkey Kong Country was a major hit for Nintendo and Rare, becoming the third best-selling game on the Super Nintendo, just behind Mario All-Stars and distantly behind Super Mario World. Though all three were bundled with the systems, so take that for what you will. Actually, the best-selling non-bundled game was Donkey Kong Country's sequel, but we'll get there in a moment. I still need to talk about the game proper. The game has way more emphasis on momentum and physics compared to, say, Super Mario World. You got a rolling attack that can not only attack enemies, but can also defy gravity and allow you to jump after just leaving the ground. It's pretty satisfying, as well as terrifying if your controls ever fail on you. You can pick up barrels, just like the arcade game, but you can also ride steel kegs to plow through enemies. But forget kegs, if you want to mow down enemies, let me introduce you to Rambi, one of the 5 animal buddies for this game. Now you can't bring any of them outside of the corresponding level, they aren't anything like Yoshi's, though they don't really need to be. They have their strengths that allow you to get collectibles and bonus rooms, though not all of them are created equal. Remy can break walls as well as defeat otherwise invincible enemies for the Kongs. Unguard the Swordfish is basically the underwater version of Rambi. Every underwater enemy is invincible to the Kongs, but for the Swordfish, all it takes is a good boop. He also makes swimming a non-issue because damn, these Kongs are heavy. Speaking of weight though, Winky has a high jump as well as the ability to jump on most enemies, but he also controls like carpal tunnel, so he's not very fun to have along. Expresso is fast and can hover. That's all he has going for him. He has no attack options whatsoever, but at least he can avoid small enemies for some reason. You'd think they'd just nibble on his legs or something. And Squawks can light one dark cave. Yeah, the only big hitters are Rambi and Unguard, and I think Rare knew that because they're the most recurring animal buddies in the series. I like the idea of animal buddies as a power-up though, and they can also act as an extra hit, which is great because the Kongs can only take 1 hit each and they just run off afterwards. I think it's supposed to be like they got captured. Diddy did get captured at the beginning, but why did they just run away? It's just confusing visually. You can find them again if you run into a DK barrel. Makes you wonder how they stuffed Donkey in a small-ass barrel. Barrels aside, we got other things to find like bananas. There are golden statues of your animal buddies, that if you collect 3, you can play a mini-game where you're in an arena filled with smaller statues to collect for extra lives. Though it seems the better the buddy is, the less lives you can possibly get. The arenas for Expresso and Winky are completely expansive, yet the arenas for Unguard and Rambi seem completely strict in the amount of collectibles contained in them. Getting the multiplier for Rambi also seems completely out of the way considering his platforming is not exactly the best. And I have to question how many lives have been lost in the Ungard arena to get the water that red. There are balloons in 3 different colors that act as lives for some reason, and they are also in the shape of Donkey Kong's head. I will not question this. If that doesn't show the ego of the Kongs yet, you also collect 4 emblems that spell out Kong, that also give you an extra life. But as a kid, seeing those letters float over to the life counter was very euphoric, mostly thanks to the sound design. Speaking of sound, this was the first soundtrack from David Wise I've listened to. And damn, this is great. Though he didn't write all of it, as Evelyn Fisher made half of the soundtrack, and little did I know some of my favorite pieces from this game were made by her, like the map music, Forest Frenzy, and Ice Cape's Chant. Probably the most underrated piece in the game, actually. And there was Robin Beanland, who only made one piece, but anyone who writes for Funky Kong deserves any kind of recognition. But the most famous pieces were made by Wise, namely Jungle Japes and Aquatic Ambience, and to be fair, they're probably my favorite pieces in the entire series. They're just absolutely perfect. A good chunk of the music is just ambience, which is of course Wise's expertise. But that doesn't mean they're not catchy. Life in the Mines is probably the prime example. Misty Caves was probably another standout, not because it's catchy, it's not really a song at all, but it was a part of probably the worst level for me as a kid. Stop and Go Mines. Fuck this stage, fuck these things in particular. They scared the shit out of me as a kid. But nowadays I'll take that level over Orangutan Gang. Love this level aesthetically, I love a good sunset. But these demons are kind of a pain with how many barrels they spawn. But oh boy, those bastards aren't even the worst part. I talked about the bonus rooms that you can find hidden in the levels. Most only have 1 to 3, and the aquatic levels have none at all. But this godforsaken level has 5 of the stupid things, and it was a long-ass hunt trying to find them. Completing the game isn't the worst part of the game, but getting to certain rooms can be a little too sneaky. Like seriously, that barrel blends way too well into the background. Or they can be straight up asinine. This part of elevator antics was completely ridiculous. No idea how anyone can find this one except maybe the zingers going out of frame. But the most aggravating one is the hidden room in Oil Drum Alley. Just hiding a bonus room inside another one is bad enough, but you have to figure out that you have to match 3 single bananas to get a barrel proper. I have to wonder how anyone can find this out. Oh, and good luck getting to the room itself. Hint, don't just ram into the wall. This one room is the sole reason the total goes to 101%, I'm damn sure. Because not only is it a pain, but all it is just spelling the game's title. Nothing more or less. The rare staff surely were made up of sadists. Though it's not like getting everything made a difference. All you get is Cranky congratulating you with a stick. And to be clear, all you need to do is find the rooms. You don't need to solve or finish any of the puzzles or anything like that. Just find them all and you get that exclamation mark on the stage titles. But hey, that as well as the boss fights, seriously, these guys are so underwhelming, I don't care about them. Really are the only bad parts of the game. It's still a classic in my eyes, and it does end with the only great boss fight with King K. Rool. Very iconic with the jumping attacks and crown throwing, topping it all off with a fake credit sequence, with a K of course. And seeing that parade is just perfect, along with Cranky making one last heckle for the game. Ain't no way this Kong can get a speedrun or anything. This was a fresh idea, and everyone was over the moon with it at the time with the 3D graphics, the banger soundtrack, and the difficulty being rather fun and mostly fair. I say mostly because I am looking at you, Blackout Basement, you piece of shit. There were rumors that Miyamoto was actually the outlier, where an Electronic Games magazine article claimed he said, and I quote, "Donkey Kong Country proves gamers will put up with mediocre gameplay if the art is good." 15 years later, though, Miyamoto came out and said, "Bullshit, motherfuckers, I was involved throughout the entire production and even emailed them every day until the very end. Don't be putting words in my mouth, you disgusting piece of shit." Paraphrasing, of course. And I'm sure he and the team at Rare were ecstatic to make a sequel, and 1 year later, we got Donkey Kong Land. Stay with me here. This was made before the completion of Donkey Kong Country and was going to be a downgraded port, but the Game Boy programmer at Rare, Paul Makakek, believed it'd be a better use of resources to make an original game. They still used pre-rendered models, but that was about the only thing these two games had in common, aside from the characters. But why would I call this a sequel exactly? Because in a wonderful use of fourth wall destruction, Cranky claims that Donkey and Diddy only had a popular game because of the graphics and believe they can't replicate it on weaker hardware. So they just let the Kremlings take the banana horde once again to shut the old man up. The game does start with the standard Jungle Jape levels, but you also get to play on K. Rool's ship as well as ice levels for some reason. Though the inclusion of flying pigs might have been the weirdest thing about that. What the hell is this? And the game actually ends with a city world, kind of a cute Donkey Kong reference in many ways. That's not all the new stuff, as the Kong letters don't actually give you an extra life this time, but instead allows you to save your game, giving them some kind of greater significance. And then there's the DK coins that actually allows you to gain extra lives in this minigame. A minigame that I absolutely suck at. Which is a shame because this game is pretty damn brutal. Like, Donkey and Diddy feel a little stiffer than they did in Country, and their jumps feel both lighter and heavier than they should. It's kind of hard to explain without playing it for yourself. The level design gets a little too cramped, mostly thanks to the screen size making hazards kind of hard to react to. These snakes are the worst of it. That took me over an hour to pass through. To a similar point, the game is also pretty guilty of some kind of Contra syndrome. Look at that trail of bananas. There is ground at the end of it, but the game gets confused and kills me anyway. That got absolutely irritating. It also happened on this stage, but I was an idiot and did not record those parts, so take my word for it. But with all that said, this is still a fairly fun and surprisingly impressive adventure. I think it's a neat experience to try out when you get the opportunity. And I hope it does get released on NSO, or you can play it on the Steam Deck. That's what I did. Fuck you, Nintendo. Also, no, Donkey Kong Land 2 and 3 are the same game as the console versions, so there's not really much of a reason to talk about them. Same with the Game Boy Color version of Donkey Kong Country, other than the fact that it feels much worse than Donkey Kong Land. Avoid this like the plague. Anyways, let's get to the actual sequels, starting with Diddy's Conquest. Not Diddy Kong's Quest. The title does insinuate that Diddy is out for literal cold blood. Okay, the red logo is still kinda sick, but why did they choose to just use a wallpaper? This is just kinda lazy. I got this game right when we moved back in 2009. I guess my parents noticed how much I loved the first game, so they bought this game, and as a confused 13-year-old, I didn't know what to think of it. There is no way I could enjoy this game as much as that masterpiece that was Donkey Kong Country. But you know, when I picked it up, I was actually a little alienated. There wasn't Donkey Kong anymore, it was just Diddy Kong being accompanied by his girlfriend Dixie. You also start on a pirate ship instead of a jungle, and the enemies are just rats, peg-leg gremlins, and enemies that are too large to take out without chests or barrels. Also, these chests can't be opened unless they get hit by an enemy, for some reason. They can contain banana bunches, extra lives, and these new banana coins that I was completely confused by, as well as with these DK coins and these gremlin coins you can find in the bonus rooms now. There was a lot of content overload for a bit, but the more I figured things out, I've come to realize that this might actually be one of the best games I've ever played. First off, I come to realize that, while I never minded Donkey Kong as a character, his weight can be a bit of a problem, especially for a platformer on the SNES. So sticking to Diddy and Girl Diddy wasn't a terrible idea. And Dixie flies circles around DK, literally. She has the ability to glide with her banana-shaped ponytail, and it makes platforming a lot more comfortable. And Diddy still works as a speedy defensive option, holding barrels and other holdables in front compared to the other two that hold things overhead. Oh, speaking of over the head, K-Rool actually Kong-napped the D to the K, and now he considers himself a captain, which I mean, he is a pirate. It makes a tad more sense to me. Now let's start talking about some doubloons. The standard banana coins are used as currency for the non-playable Kongs. You can give them the Cranky for some bonus room hints, or you can give them the Funky for a ride, which was free in the last game, but I guess he needs money for maintenance. Though there are two new cards to talk about as well, the first being Wrinkly Kong, Cranky Kong's wife. What, you actually thought Junior was conceived by Pauline, you sick depraved degenerates? You'll save your game as well as pay for tips. I really like that addition, though paying for consecutive saves may not rub the right way for most people. Thank you NSO and emulation. I do like her inclusion though. This dickhead, on the other hand, this is Swanky Kong, and you can pay him to take quidges for lives, and it's not something I care for. Or even believe it's necessary. I hate this dude's design and overall swagger. This dude doesn't have the Drew Carey or Steve Harvey levels of charm. I only use the banana coins to save my game, as well as the occasional barrel ride. I was a little too prideful to get any hints from Cranky, and I wasn't gonna visit this bastard, fuck him. Plus, there were plenty of opportunities to grind lives, whether it be through a bunch of bananas or finding balloons that now look like Diddy. This is starting to get a lot more terrifying. Though you can't pop on enemies to get an extra life anymore, that's kinda disappointing. But those Kremlin and DK coins were a joy to find. The former actually gives the bonus rooms a purpose. And unlike the first game, you can try them out as many times as you want, as long as you have the ability to anyway. I just love the little title cards for the bonus rooms, my favorite being, "Destroy them all." You want to know what else I love in this game? The animal buddies once again. Rambi, Ungard, and Squawks are the only returning buddies, and they got some upgrades, with Rambi and Ungard having this charge move to attack enemies and bust down walls. But Squawks, however, was completely overhauled, with the ability to fly and cough up eggs as projectiles. It's gross and a little disturbing, but it gets the job done. There's another parrot known as Quawks, who is practically just a glorified parachute. Alright. There's Clapper, that just turns hot water into cold water and cold water into ice. Cool. And there's Glimmer, just the original Squawks, but underwater. Will he shoot eggs in the next game too? We'll know soon enough. But the two main writers are Radley the Snake and Squitter the Spider. Radley is pretty much a better Winky, not as wonky. Okay, that was kind of fun to say. And he also has a charge for his jump, which does take a little time, making it a bit uncomfortable in certain situations. And then there's Squitter, my favorite of the new cast by far, just for the web projectiles and being able to create platforms with said webs. It is just fun to break levels with this dude, and his design is just so goofy. I love him so much. I wish all spiders were little weirdos like this. The most interesting thing about them, though, is that you can become them. I have no idea why they did this, except maybe make the levels artificially harder. I don't know. But going back to the levels, man, this game went hard this time. The original just had standard biomes like jungles, factories, caves, snowy mountains, and a forest. Here you got the pirate ship from the K. Rool fight, there's a molten lava-filled volcano, a creepy swamp and forest with floating coats and ropes that look like what you think they look like. There's an entire carnival with roller coaster races from Kremlings and a dead guy in a library. It's just got so much more personality here, and the music from David Wise gives that personality a major boost. And it is just Wise this go around, Fisher and Beamland being completely absent. The music is mostly on the ambient side, but it still has its fair share of memorable tracks. Snaky Shanty, Forest Interlude, Mining Melancholy, and Sticker Brush Symphony being the big highlights for me. I also love the boss music way more than the previous game, with its feeling of dread and intensity compared to DKC's more jovial, devious take. And that's good because the bosses hit much harder this time, and I enjoyed just about all of them. The Zinger boss being the exception. That one was more annoying than tense. And as much as I enjoyed the original fight with K. Rool, it was a bit on the simple side. The fight with Captain K. Rool, on the other hand, I will not mince words here, one of the best final bosses I've ever fought. The chaotic shooting of K. Rool's blunderbuss, the way he rockets from side to side, he can shoot gas clouds that can alter your movement, his ability to try and vacuum up the Kongs, leaving the only opportunity to attack him with one of his stray cannonballs, and even that has a counter-attack to dodge. It's just a fast-paced bout with a little room to err, but never to a point where it seems overwhelming. But what if I told you that there's a second fight with him? That's where this dude Klubba comes in. For 15 of these Kremlin coins, he can give you access to one of the Lost World levels per world you find him. And these levels are no joke, where quick reflexes and careful movements are key to beating these stages. Though they have their annoying little gimmicks, looking at you animal antics and your awful squawk section. Seriously, most of the game's gimmicks are fresh and exciting, but any level involving wind are just the worst parts of the game, especially when there is a lot of events and hazards to worry about. And when all that is done, you got the big croc to deal with once again, and he kinda sucks. The attacks are more simple than the original fight, and most of his attacks don't pack much urgency. Not much of an encore, if you ask me. And after you take out the Crocodile King and watch his empire blow up in a glittery fashion, you can bask in the glory of finding all 40 DK coins for no reason other than bragging rights, and learning that Sonic and Earthworm Jim were viciously murdered. Holy shit. I absolutely love this game. It's got its hiccups, but it's honestly a perfect platformer, at least for the Super Nintendo. Definitely in my top 3 on the console, alongside Final Fantasy VI and Super Metroid. Shame they couldn't keep that up with the threequel. Dixie Kong's Triple Trouble is a weird game to talk about, considering it is simultaneously the most ambitious game in the trilogy, but also felt like the most standard. First off, Donkey and Diddy are not playable in this game, with Dixie being the main character this go-around, as the name suggests. But with the two Kongs taken away, who's the second in command this go-around? Well, here it is. This is Dixie's cousin Kiddy Kong, who might be the worst thing Rare has ever brought into this world, and I am very much including Canary Mary. The design is kinda gross, being this giant baby with really big lips and a bright blue onesie. If I saw this thing in the real world, I would have burned it without any hesitation. He's trying to be the best parts of Diddy and Donkey, but his weight is abysmal, his tag action with Dixie feels stiff, and when you lose a life, he destroys her fucking eardrums. And I have no idea how anyone can figure this out, but he can skip on water. It's only used once, but seriously, why the hell is this a thing? And finally, why the fuck would I ever want to play as a toddler? In fact, his entire existence kind of releases this very childish aura around it. Just look at the game over screen. This is just a ridiculous scene with some really obnoxious chimes playing through it. Also, the end of level jingle seems a little too soft for my taste. Just listen. Comparing it to the previous game wouldn't be fair, but screw it. The level design is also a bit watered down compared to the previous games, and I'm not saying that because you have a hub map where you sail across the water. There are some decent level tropes like the woodworks or the tree climbing stages, and there are still plenty of fun gimmicks surrounding those, like these owls that shoot out red hot cheese balls, and this level where you try to beat the world record. And you know what? The Water Pro levels are the best in the game. Really strong platforming with interesting two-plane level design. But then there are plenty of levels that are just a little too flat, namely the pure levels. And there are levels with very patience-testing gimmicks. To name a few, Lightning Lookout has you dodging lightning while dealing with water and tight platforms. Logi Labyrinth has you in low gravity, making the platformer slow and a bit too tight. And Poisonous Pipeline has your controls reversed in a water level, which just speaks for itself. The second to last level, Rocket Rush though, worst level in the game without question. You have just enough fuel to get to the top, and if you hit a ceiling, well, that's game over right there. Fucking hate this level. On a similar note actually, the sledding levels feel way faster than the minecart or the roller coaster. Mostly because the amount of hazards are through the roof. The amount of buzzsaw bees is astounding. Oh, come the fuck on! But it's far worse if you wanted to locate those bonus barrels. Now, I'm mixed about these here. On one hand, you only need to find 2 for each level, with the exception of the last world. Shame, getting 2 and playing these is a pain in the ass. Well, collect the stars is still as simple as it was in the previous game. And beat the baddies, which that title is an absolute downgrade, are still as fun as they were in the previous game, though they had their stinkers. Now, collect the bananas on the other hand? Just fuck this game. It's not tense enough for the timer to keep counting down, but you have to worry about the bananas themselves disappearing after a couple of seconds. And most of these require you to move around a lot of hazards. Just fuck off. Now let's get to those animal buddies, shall we? Unguard Squitter and Squawks return with very little changes. And Squawks actually has the ability to fly this time and carry barrels. I guess that's an improvement. But for some reason, Rambi is completely absent. And this is the only time where a Donkey Kong game with animal buddies doesn't really have him in. Now there is one buddy that replaces him, Ellie. Fuck Ellie. Not only does she have nowhere near the combat potential compared to Rambi, but she needs water or barrels to attack certain enemies, and she also gets scared of mice. This is just such a stupid weakness for a platform game. But you know what? At least to her credit, she's only the second worst Ellie I played in a video game. As for this thing is practically worthless, and escorting them is just kind of boring. You want to know another addition that's also kind of boring? The Brothers Bear. They just kind of exist for a bunch of fetch quests. And also the first bear you find is the only NPC that accepts currency. Well, him and Swanky, but fuck Swanky. He only gives you bananas and his games just kind of suck dick. I don't understand why Cranky cares so much about this. Though this gameplay style does come back for one of the bosses in the game, a snowman that attacks you with giant snowballs and dies via jazz hand. I can certainly say that he's the best boss in the game, but that's not really saying much because the other bosses they're just really bad. Like seriously, the first boss is just a belching barrel. Okay. And then there's this waterfall boss that spouts water while you have to play as Ellie. But the most offensive part about it is that it reminds me of the singer from Jabba's Palace, and that just makes me sick to my stomach. Now, I did a lot of bitching, I'm aware, but I don't hate this game overall, and I'll give a couple of compliments to finish things off. The big one, of course, being the soundtrack. David Wise didn't return for the most part, with Evelyn Fisher taking the helm. And while I wouldn't place any of these alongside the previous 2 soundtracks, they work pretty well in the moments. Though I can't hear the song without thinking of the Mr. Peanut Butter theme song from BoJack. To give a few of my favorites though, I love Hanging at Funky's, Rock Face Rumble, Waterworld, and Treetop Tumble. Though the GBA version of that last one kind of ruins the tension of this stage in particular. Yeah, for some reason David Wise actually made a completely different soundtrack for the GBA, and for the most part it's pretty good. Though I do gotta admit, a lot of the songs do mesh a little bit, and it's a little distracting. Fisher certainly has the upper hand in comparison. And there is still some fun to be had with the collectibles. The main currency is completely pointless in this game, but finding them while exploring is still kind of intriguing in some weird way. I am a little mixed on how the DK coins are just the same puzzle over and over again with this jerk. Though I gotta give it to them, this design is fucking amazing. And if you collect the DK coin, he's just holding up a trash can lid. It's just absolutely hilarious. I love it. And at least the puzzles get a little more creative as the game goes on, so I can give them that as well. And the new collectible, the banana birds, are kind of interesting. Trying to find a secret cave and doing this little Simon Says minigame to free them, minus a couple that are being held by the brother bears. And you get to bring them to Wrinkly for company. That's really wholesome, and she's playing Mario 64 on her brand new Nintendo 64. Buy our new hardware, you chuckle nuts, we want money. And the final boss with K. Rool isn't too bad, though it's a far cry from the last time. You have to fight this thing for a second time, and once he reveals himself Oz style, he just spats references to Scooby-Doo and I assume another movie that I can't recall. Also, what's with the Frankenstein influence here? At least the captain thing made sense, he's a goddamn pirate for God's sakes. But whatever, the arena is electrified, you hit his copter pack with barrels, and free Donkey Kong and Diddy, who were apparently mind-controlled to be the Chaos Robot? Sure, I'll believe that. But if you collect every Banana Bird and DK coin, you get to fight him again in a similar fashion, free the Queen Banana Bird, and see the Baron get harassed and float down the river. A decent end to a fairly decent game. The creativity still shines in many places, and when the level design is solid, it's really damn solid. But it's nowhere as fun as the previous games. I can't say I'll ever play this one again, at least as much as Country 1 and 2. And with that said, I think that's enough Donkey Kong Country talk for now. Wait, do I talk about the television show? No! Yep, someone thought it'd be a good idea to make a television show about a gorilla that fights crocodiles for a bunch of phallic berries. Though when you see that the show was made by Nelvana, it kinda makes sense. Though this was certainly more chaotic than most of their catalog. The story basically boils down to K. Rool steals the magical MacGuffin called the Crystal Coconut, and Donkey Kong has to retrieve it. Thing is, the ape is dumb as fuck. In fact, most of the characters are barely cognizant. The only smart characters in this show are King K. Rool, which is pronounced K-Rool for some reason, and Cranky Kong, who is skilled in the art of music and sorcery in the first episode. Hell, in that episode, he straight up makes an instant cure to bring back Donkey Kong's strength after his hair was cut by a robot Candy Kong. This is the type of show you are hearing about. And yes, that's not Donkey Kong's hair. That curve is clearly a tumor. Can you tell that this show can get downright chaotic? And sometimes it's in an entertaining way, and sometimes in a really awkward way.
Come on! Put a lip lock on me, Dixie!
Okay, if anyone calls kissing lip locking, you probably need to be thrown in prison. Jesus Christ, why is literally everyone an idiot? I mean, I get why Donkey is a dipshit.
Hey, DK! Candy!
But that's because he's clearly a simp. Speaking of which, the relationship between Candy and Donkey is just kind of uncomfortable, with Candy having such a short fuse at the slightest inconvenience, and Donkey is just taking all the abuse. Even better when they turn the couple into a love triangle with this new creation, Bluster, who exists to verbally and sexually harass Candy Kong.
Don't bother, I'm watching it for ya.
Yeah, he's the worst part of the show by far. Aside from the pace, the lack of consistency even in the episodes themselves, and the music.
Right! The more you can do! Like cook banana burgers on the barbecue!
Oh yeah, did I mention that this show is a musical? Like, they don't sing just every once in a while. I mean, there are literally 2 separate songs per episode. Whoever came up with this insane premise, first off, I hope you found enough psychological help. But I also hope you were compensated greatly because this is the dumbest, greatest idea anyone's ever come up with.
What's with all the worry? Can't you see I'm in a hurry? It's a perfect gift for our anniversary.
Now, I'm not saying the songs are good. Oh god, no. Most of these songs are just objective musical atrocities. Like, anytime Diddy Kong needs to sing, it's like he needs to drink a barrel of water.
I never thought this job would be full of so much misery. Sack and bananas, what I know.
And Cranky can't sing for shit because he's old as fuck.
I'm gonna be a smash! You'll see me on the top of big name stars, spending all of my do-re-mi gold cash.
The music is kind of catchy at a melodic level, but the lyrics are just awkward and sometimes incomprehensible. But you know, some of the cats have surprisingly good vocal deliveries, to the point where they kind of make the really bad lyrics kind of tolerable. K. Rool has a fairly operatic singing voice, and damn, I can't say Donkey Kong's voice actor is quite the perfect fit for the character, but he can certainly sing.
Once I was the ape of the hour, they think I'm a coward, an absolute zero. I'm nobody's hero.
At least if I have to hear the awful lyrics, I can be assured that a lot of the songs were sung by this dude.
I'd shower you with coconut cream pie.
There, I did the thing, are you satisfied? Actually, forget the lyrics, the motion capture also kinda makes it more unsettling. No idea why they decided to bother with it in the first place, but at least it makes the show more entertaining, I guess. I'm almost convinced that they did it just to make the premise more insane, along with the songs and the insane dialogue. There's no way it wasn't made to save on money, especially for how expensive mocap used to be. Actually, now that I think about it, I think it's still expensive. I can't guarantee this show will entertain you, but I was certainly finding it amusing, mostly because my sense of humor has been broken for years. Plus, we need a good ironic chuckle every once in a while, so that's my excuse. Now, the Crystal Coconut would have been a great segue to Donkey Kong 64, but there's another game we have to talk about first.
So long comes.
They couldn't retake that line, really? I have heard nothing but praise for Diddy Kong Racing for well over a decade now. And I was sure it was quality, but I'm not a huge fan of racing games as a genre. Not that I hate them or anything, but they just tend to feel cookie cutter the more I play them. Diddy Kong Racing did have some unique items at the time though. Less importantly, the roster contains a couple of Rare's upcoming mascots with Banjo the Honey Bear and Conker the Squirrel before he looked like he wanted to piss in my drink. It was also the first game to make you play as a Kremling, and I learned that he was the worst character in the game and couldn't play past the first track. So I played as the poster boy for this. He played good enough for me. And you could actually change characters by restarting the game, so you have an opportunity to try out some characters. But since this is a DK video, I wasn't going to take advantage of that. That and the fact that I was getting a little bored with the adventure mode. The tracks were a little bland, though I'll take that as them being the beginning levels. And the boss of the world fucking cheats and took me about an hour to beat both the original race and the rematch. Replaying that race, as well as the original tracks just to collect those damn silver coins to unlock said rematch. If this was any indication for the rest of the game, I think I'll pass. I will say, the game looks amazing for the console, and the soundtrack is one of David Wise's best. I was going to praise the vehicle types, which I assumed you could choose in the races, but they're locked to particular tracks, which isn't too surprising as that'd break the game a little bit. But that just leaves the other vehicles that isn't the traditional kart feel unnecessary. Oh well. I can see why this is a classic to many people, but it's not my cup of tea, unfortunately. Hopefully I won't have to play another racing game for this video. Donkey Kong 64. Oh yeah, this is the big boy right here, the game that, apparently, killed the entire collectathon platforming genre. I was pretty concerned to play this game for the longest time, just for the fact that it's like 20, 30, maybe more hours to even complete the game. And for someone who likes to play as much as I can with games like this, I was anxious to even attempt it. So...
Here we go.
Oh god, this rap is completely awful. But damn if it's not fun, catchy, and most importantly, fun to make fun of. Even Grant Kirkhope admitted that he made this as a dumb joke. Yeah, instead of David Wise or even Evelyn Fisher, the game's music was actually made by the composer of Banjo-Kazooie. And it works well for a platformer that feels similar to the Tales of the Bear and Bird. But instead of making music for a game that has a witch stealing the looks of a little girl, it's for a game that has King K. Rool returning to evaporate the island of Congo Bongo with a laser cannon. This dude is actually serious for once, actually going over the top with the genocide. Even tortures his own army to get the thing running. Something tells me that these guys are one step closer to forming a coup de grace. And yes, that coup does start with a K. Now let's talk about those Kongs, shall we? We got the main Kong himself, who is apparently bigger and faster and stronger than before, despite needing a potion to pull a goddamn lever. Kinda makes that part of the song moot. Diddy Kong is back, and about time too. Actually, what does he mean? He's always been here. Except then, but that doesn't count. But there are 3 new faces, the first being Lanky Kong, an orangutan that is just the silliest little guy. Look at this apex primate, I love him so much. Until he learns to inflate himself just like a balloon. Cause when I think of that, I want to die soon. There's also Tiny Kong, Dixie Kong's younger sister, which makes me wonder why Dixie isn't here instead. Since she has the ability to glide and climb up trees, even though every Kong can climb up trees, okay. And then there's Chunky Kong, the sibling to the one that disturbs my nightmares. And unlike Tiny, I am perfectly fine with him replacing my actual paralysis demon. What I do have an issue with is that he kinda undermines Donkey Kong's most defining traits. You know, the fact that he's bigger, and faster, and stronger too. Okay, maybe not the faster part, but you get my point. His entire existence feels completely redundant, since one of his upgrades is practically the bananas! And his special barrel technique is just getting big and being a terror. And if you don't recall what I'm referring to, just flip that 6 into a 9 and there you go. Now sure, that was Cranky Kong, and yes, it was because of the mushrooms, but A, mushrooms are universal, and B, can you seriously tell me that Chunky's barrel isn't filled with mushrooms? Can you? You can comment and tell me it isn't. Go right ahead. But what's funny to me is that Chunky has the weight-gaining drug, while Donkey Kong has invincibility, the ability that appeared in every game he wasn't playable in. Oh, I should probably talk about Cranky, shouldn't I? Instead of being an old crank banging his grandchildren with a stick, he decided to get into medicine or something of the sort, making potions to increase the Kong's capabilities. I am absolutely surprised that this game took that exact idea from the show. I already talked about Donkey Kong getting the short end of the stick, most likely as a geriatric prank, and the first potion he got was literally the ability to shoot out of barrels. I'm pretty sure Cranky just gave him garlic water. Diddy has it somewhat better, as he gets a charge attack, the ability to spring like a certain Breagle, and given the license to fly a shitty barrel jetpack. This thing is fine when you don't have to deal with precise actions, but considering that's what you do 95% of the time, it makes that praise practically worthless. Like he gets the ability to climb steep hills, I wonder if Rare recycled some things from their last platformer. And he can get the ability to do it faster, which seems unnecessary. And there's the third ability, and we'll move on from there. Tiny gets the ability to shrink, don't be too shocked, gains the ability to copyright infringement, and the ability to teleport, which is only used, like, 3 times. Though honestly, this is the only time where I would say that the potion actually makes sense. Oh, never mind, there's Chunky's ability to turn invisible, which is about as rare. Ha! But at least it fits him well because it seems like he doesn't even want to be here. Then why the fuck are you? It's an interesting idea, given the Kong's more abilities the further you are in the game, but some of the abilities just shouldn't have been character exclusive, or they shouldn't have been upgrades in the first place. Again, doing a handstand and pulling fucking levers shouldn't be goddamn upgrades. Whatever, Cranky's a scam artist and we all have to live with that. But Cranky isn't the only person you can talk to for rewards. Candy Kong actually comes back with an even more seductive design. Thank you, Rare, I hate it. She can get the Kong's health extensions, which sounds absolutely strange, especially considering your health is represented by melons. I wonder how Rare came up with that. I don't think I want to see what a 3-breasted woman looks like, and please don't send me pictures, I am not interested. On a more wholesome note though, she will give all the Kong's instruments that are useful for puzzles, as well as full-on screen nukes. I said more wholesome, not fully. I like that Linky gets a trombone, look at him do his little toots. Donkey Kong gets bongos, very fitting. Same with Diddy getting the guitar, probably Dixie's I'm sure. Tiny has a sax, which is pretty neat, and Chunky has a fucking triangle. I am almost certain this Kong exists just to be a punching bag, ironically enough. Oh no, wait a minute, he gets an actual fucking bazooka, I spoke too soon. And the one that gives him that bazooka? Funky Kong, of course. You might think he's not a gun bro, but look at him. He totally looks like a psychopath that has a collection of firearms in his basement. Now granted, they're more G-rated, but earlier versions definitely lead more into the GoldenEye side of the pendulum. Instead of the Kong shooting bullets, these weapons shoot out stuff like peanuts, grapes, feathers, coconuts, and pineapples. Though to be fair, those last two may as well have been bullets. Those things are hard enough to break skulls. And then there's Wrinkly. She's dead. Wait, I'm sorry, what? Yeah, she died between this game and Country 3. The game killed the sweet old lady, now I like it less. She only gives you a few hints toward golden bananas, and from what I can gather, she only gives you one for each Kong in each level. Even the ones you already got. Granny, I literally got that one 15 minutes into the level. The only non-Kong you run into is this dude named Snide. He made the cannon for K. Rool, but was completely screwed over, so he needs some blueprints taken from these guys, the Kersplats, and for every blueprint, he'll give a banana. And that's a decent segue to the collectibles. And Jesus Christ, Rare went completely mad here. First off, most of these collectibles are character selective, each being color-coded to a specific Kong. Yellow for Donkey, red for Diddy, blue for Lanky, purple for Tiny, and green for Chunky. Wow, thanks, didn't need the flashback so soon, Rare. Also, I don't want to know what a purple banana would be like, that sounds absolutely gross. Oh yeah, the main collectibles of the entire series needed to be collected by certain Kongs. The only reason I can see them being color-coded is to get enough banana mills so that they can play a game of Jetpack, one of Rare's earliest games, and also one that hasn't aged well in my opinion. And this is required to beat the game, by the way, all for a stupid coin to open a door in K. Rool's throne room. You also need to get a few of these battle crowns from these random arenas, as well as another coin by beating the original Donkey Kong. I'm not as angry about this one, but you do need to play it twice, so if you don't like the original arcade game, well, sorry. The balloons also return, but since lives aren't a thing, they gave you 10 bananas instead. Unlike the regular bananas, I'm perfectly fine with these being color-coded. Same with the aforementioned banana coins and blueprints. And finally, when you meet this banana fairy that also has really big breasts, what's with Rare and their obsession with giant knockers? Even the hippo and pig have nipple rings on their bitch tits. I mean, I won't judge, but... I'm sorry, where was I? Oh yeah, tits! She actually tasks you to find her fellow banana fairies by taking their pictures. Okay. But at least they can increase your inventory of orange grenades, which is such a delightful idea. And crystal coconuts, which are used for special abilities. Seriously, how much of this game was actually inspired by the television show? And finding all the fairies can actually give you an extra golden banana, bringing the overall total to 201. You heard me right, 201 of the bleeding things, which means you got a lot of stupid shit to do to find them. Each Kong has 5 bananas to find in each level, one of those 5 being the blueprints, so technically it's 4 bananas each. Now, if I'm being frank, there are only 2 times where the bananas become a pain to get. One of the most frequent is with the racing challenges. None of these are fun at all, with the stupid-ass minecarts having you collect coins, which is like trying to go through a full parking lot at Walmart at 80 miles per hour. There's the races where not only do you have to take first place, but you have to collect enough coins before hitting the finish line, and shout out to the Pirate Seal that also makes you go through checkpoints as well, with him also boosting in front of you just to taunt. I should have let you rot in that cage, me fucking matey. Also, fuck this rabbit. At least you only need to go through the checkpoints, which is okay. But then he goes, good job, but I want to run 2 before you get your banana, and I'm gonna go 10 times faster. This took me over 2 hours to finish, mostly because I had to keep grinding for crystal coconuts. Sounds like I'm talking about taking meth while playing this. Would have made this more exciting, probably. And you know what, to a similar situation, the second type of challenges that I absolutely can't stand are the ones where I have to use this damn thing. Like I said, when you have to get precise, it's annoying. But when you put a time limit slapped over it, that's where I wanted to break the fucking screen. This game was seriously one step closer to making me hate owls, and that's just a fucking crime right there. That one challenge, as well as this room in Crystal Caves, was strict as hell, what with the unconventionally raised platforms and annoying enemy placements thanks to these barrel assholes. And if you fail, you have to leave the room or else this target starts shooting you down. Like, just let me kill these bastards without the time limit. Jesus, that was another 2 hours I'm never getting back. But all that aside, I had a really great time with this game. Most of these levels were just fun to explore, and while it'd be way more fun if the bananas weren't character sensitive, the platforming in this game was still superb as you would expect from Rare. The bosses were pretty neat, though the Jack-in-the-Box dude can kiss my ass, and the second rematch with the Dragonfly Dragon felt kinda rigged. There's plenty of barrel challenges ranging from mazes that require either stealth or slaughter, slamming Kremlings with melons, trying to avoid hitting the Kongs with melons, this one was a little strict because of the emulation, swinging on vines collecting coins, swatting flies, playing a slot machine. Okay, not all of them are winners. I've heard a lot of people complain about Beaver Bother, and yeah, this was a pain in the ass. The Naughty are just way too smart in these. Just another 4 or 5 hours I'm never taking back. Every one of these games was copied for a total of 2 or 3 times, and while they are scattered around, it's still kinda creatively bankrupt. Like, they were trying way too hard to hit a specific number of golden bananas to collect. Also, you have to play Beaver Bother twice in the final level, and that's just mentally insane. I feel like having 5 characters just kinda shot them in the foot. Like, having to have 5 separate ways for each Kong to collect 5 separate bananas for each of the 8 worlds feels just complete overkill. So why have that many Kongs? Just to make the game bigger? I spent over 30 hours just getting everything, and while I had my fun, I can't say I'll ever go back to this game, only because there's just too much to do. And even if you're not grabbing all 201 bananas, you still need to get enough small bananas to feed the hippo, you still need to play Jetpack and Donkey Kong for those extra coins, you're gonna want those blueprints to make the final level a hell of a lot more manageable, and you still need at least 100 bananas to beat the game, so you're gonna need to suffer through some of the racing, you'll need to deal with that jetpack every once in a while, and whatever other puzzles you're not really into, you're gonna have to do them anyway. I understand that's a collectathon gig, but it's completely ramped up to the max here. Donkey Kong 64 is a mess. It's a fun mess at times, but a mess nonetheless. and it made a negative impact on the genre, without any question, and it's the sole reason we never got another 3D Donkey Kong ever since. I would love them to do this again, a Donkey Kong 3D platformer that doesn't have this many Kongs to play with, that doesn't have this many collectibles to worry about, and maybe do a better job at figuring out the upgrades. Unfortunately, Rare won't be part of it, since this was the last DK game before they were bought by Microsoft, and we all know how that turned out. Oh no wait, they also made the DS version of Diddy Kong Racing. Okay, okay. Jesus Christ, I've been talking about this damn game for far too long. Let's move on to something else. Never mind, I want to go back to the hellhole. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you guys didn't even know this existed. I played this over a decade ago on emulator because, frankly, the name caught my eye and I was kinda bored. And this was before I decided to make stupid long videos to test my patience and sanity. And nowadays, yeah, this game is still testing my patience. It's just Donkey Kong swinging on pegs and very little else. There is a story here, and there are collectibles, but seriously, who cares? What you are seeing on screen is what you are getting, and I literally can't explain it in words, and trying to is just making me more bored. I will say it does have some really gorgeous sprites, and the soundtrack is pretty okay. But otherwise, let's just forget that this game ever existed, alright? Wow, the amount of time I talked about this felt like complete whiplash compared to the last game. Speaking of whiplash, though, let's start banging some drums. Pretty sure that reference just went over everyone's heads. If you have no idea what these are, first off, educate yourself in the world of music. But second, these are bongos. But not just any bongos. Bongos with an umbilical cord. Now you may be assuming that these controllers are made for a very specific rhythm game. And you'd be correct. This is Donkey Konga, a game that makes you bang bongos and clap to the rhythm of random pop songs. Makes some kind of sense considering the game was made by Namco, who also made the drum game. Yeah, I'm too lazy to Google the name. I probably don't think I need to say more, mostly because trying to describe a rhythm game as simple as this doesn't take too much time. But what if you don't want to play All-Star with bongos and are more interested in playing a platformer with them instead? Well, my slightly psychotic friend, let me introduce you to Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. Oh god, the phone autocorrected to breast. Now, the idea of playing a platformer with plastic bongos sounds completely insane, and if Nintendo are anything, they certainly are crazy enough to try it. And yes, Nintendo themselves actually developed it with a brand new branch, which consisted of a fairly familiar name today. Does Yoshiaki Koizumi ring a bell? Yep, the guy that was in charge of marketing the Switch for a while also developed this game. He's been a developer for Nintendo since the 90s, but this would have been one of the first times he actually directed a video game for them. A game in which your palms will go blood red with all the clapping you're going to be doing. Yeah, if you thought the bongos were going to be the big issue themselves, funnily enough, that's not the case. You just press the left drum to go left, and right to go right. No actual banging required, since all the bongos are just two giant buttons. Also, if you need to jump, you just press both of them at the same time. And hitting one of those drums near an enemy will give them the beating of a lifetime. DK! And that may sound like a recipe for disaster, and there were some misputs here and there, but it was impressively responsive. But the other mechanic is where the pain really starts, with collecting the bananas, and clapping to increase your score multiplier. And hey, the sight of those numbers rising created plenty of serotonin. But god does it give your hands plenty of calluses! Though I did actually look at the manual and it does say that you can actually use a regular controller, so I guess that's not exactly that big of a problem in hindsight. That high number also becomes your health bar for each kingdom's boss, and call me crazy, these bosses are way more fun than they have any right to be. Following melon grenades back at a wild boar, throwing pineapple bombs at a robotic elephant, and headbanging at an iron egg are surprisingly exciting. And none of the bosses tend to last too long anyway, so you won't have to worry about your hands going red for too long. Whatever bananas you have left will grant you crests after you finish a kingdom, which unlock more kingdoms, named after fruit, apparently. I would seriously call this one of the best games in the series, but the control scheme really gets in the way. And I'm sure they knew this, as the game doesn't last that long either. I wasn't able to play the entire thing since my hands were getting a little tired of all the clapping. But even with less than an hour of playtime, I was halfway through the game already. With the game being less than $30 today, strangely enough, I'd say it's worth it in the end. I wish I knew sooner that I could use the regular controller to make it a lot less tense, but hey, it was a fun experience nonetheless. Damn, now I really want a 3D Donkey Kong game from these guys. Mario Odyssey was amazing, but just imagine them making a new Donkey Kong game that's even more ridiculous than 64. Just imagine. Yeah, we'll see. Anyway, what's next on the list? Oh, son of a bitch! I think several of you may be thinking I'm anxious thanks to this game's infamy, and that may be true. But what I hate more is that I have to play a racing game that now has really shaky motion controls. Donkey Kong Barrel Blast is a game that exists made by the same people that made this piece of melatonin. So I can't understand what any of this means. I get the shaking to get max speed, I suppose. But wait, how am I supposed to charge move? I'm hitting every button and doing every motion, and I can't replicate it. What's with the items? None of them seem to do anything as far as I'm concerned. Why am I in 8th place? I'm pretty much at max speed for most of the race, and I'm finding all the shortcuts. What is this bullshit? Oh, Dixie was one of the slowest characters in the game. I'm pretty sure I noticed that, so that's on me. But even playing as Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong, I can comfortably say that this is one of the worst games I've ever played. It is just confusing, exhausting, and even worse, boring. I'm pretty sure if I cared enough, I'd look to see how this game played on this thick as a Bible manual. Holy shit. Or was there a tutorial mode? Oh, there was. Shows how much I care, man. Which sucks because this is the only time Kremlings were playable in anything aside from DKR. Not that they're great designs, most of them look kinda shit. I'm pretty sure this is racist of some kind, but I feel unequipped to say. Why the fuck does Clump have a bucket on his head? The Kongs are mostly fine. Likey is back, which is great. And this is the first time Cranky, Funky, and Rinky are playable in anything, which is depressing, and no. No, that is not the same time. Oh god, it is! And apparently this is not the first game with this design either. Thank you, Diddy Kong Racing DS. Oh god, Rare made this design? That almost kinda makes it worse. Why does she look like she's older than Dixie? What was so wrong with the original design? This is so wrong on so many levels. I'm gonna move on. I refuse to talk about this more. Oh, fuck. Okay, Payon, you slimy sons of bitches, I need you to fuck off. I'm sure you made some pretty great stuff aside from these, but I don't really care at the moment, because this is round 3 of games that I'm probably not gonna like. Actually, you know what? To give them credit, I kind of enjoyed myself with this one. It's just a better version of King of Swing. Donkey Kong feels bigger, faster, and stronger too, sorry. He does feel looser, certainly has a faster turn speed, there's a quicker charge move, and you can use Diddy Kong as a projectile, I guess. And thankfully, it's not reliant on the shoulder buttons, though I guess instead of physical distress, they have to make you see Donkey Kong shaking ass. Equivalent exchange, I guess. And the first boss fight was actually kind of fun. It was pretty creative, and speaking of creativity, we get this banana-shaped alien called Zenadbab. Zenanab. Oh, I see what you did. I can certainly respect the creativity, but I don't think I'll pick this one up anytime soon. It's just kind of a boring concept no matter how many quality of life updates and weird-ass ideas you put into it. I would like to see Zenadab back for the next Donkey Kong game. Please, Nintendo, this dude is a fucking mood. I love him. And finally, we're at the big ones, the final games in the franchise, and I am so happy to be talking about them, finally. With Rare being stuck with Microsoft, the country games have been in limbo for over a decade. And you know, Jungle Beat tried its best, and the King of Swing duology was a neat little distraction. But in 2010, we got a nice little return. And from an unlikely source, too. Who would have thought that a studio known for 3D action-adventure games with moody atmospheres and extensive lore would make the next installment of Donkey Kong Country? Well, the interesting thing about that is, after the completion of Metroid Prime 2, Retro president Michael Kelba told Kensuke Tanabe that they were interested in making a new Donkey Kong game. And considering he was actually a tester for the Country series, it sounded like it'd be a wonderful passion project. And luckily, with Miyamoto expressing interest in reviving Donkey Kong Country, Tanabe gave a good word for Retro and they were given the task, with Satoru Iwata even stating Retro generated an energy that was poured into that game. That game being, appropriately named, Donkey Kong Country Returns. I've always wanted to try this game for so long, and the reason I never got to it back then was because I was 14 when it came out, and I could never get a job or any form of allowance because my family literally just moved and my parents barely had money to give away. Also, when I did get the ability to buy stuff for myself, the sequel was already a year old, so yeah, that's what happens when you live in a small town. Yeah, whatever. I would get the 3DS version in 2016, and I actually did not finish it at all. 2 reasons. 1, I got way into the time trials to a point where I never went past the 2nd level. Second, the 3DS was starting to feel just a little cramped at that point. And playing it now, the problem is way more obvious. The Switch and Steam Deck really spoiled me greatly. Speaking of which, while I did plan on playing the 3DS version for this video, the truth is my 3DS capture card is hanging in there, but fixes can only help so much, so I could only get about 15 minutes before it shat the bed. Did the same thing for Jungle Climber, if you were wondering. So I decided to play the Wii version on EmuDeck. Remember, emulation is fine as long as you have the official version, or if they don't allow you to have the official version. Feel dumb for killing the eShop yet, Nintendo? Anyway, Returns runs surprisingly great on Steam Deck, and the graphics are just luscious. Way better than playing it on an actual Wii. Shame it tends to micro-freeze every once in a while, but that's to be expected. Also, playing this on a Switch Pro controller feels so natural, aside from the shaking being tied to both of the left shoulder buttons. Kinda makes the moments where you're beating the shit out of the Tikis look weird as hell. Yeah, instead of the Kremlings being the main threat this time, we have these Tiki tribe dudes that hypnotize the animals to collect as many bananas as possible. Thankfully, Donkey and Diddy are way too stupid for that shit, so yeah, that was lame, wasn't it? Oh man, this feels so nostalgic. It is a shame the Kremlings aren't around to harass anymore, but that Jungle Japes remix is sublime, and the controls feel nice and loose. It took me getting used to the controls, since rolling is now a motion-controlled action, as well as banging the ground, which I keep forgetting was in the original game as well. But here it actually stuns enemies, so it's far more useful here. And also, you can blow. Yes, seriously, blow. Glad they got rid of that for the sequel. Now, it may look and sound like the original Donkey Kong Country, and that was completely on purpose to keep it familiar. Even with the lack of swashbuckling crocs, you get to break the backs of any ornery birds, these discount piranha plants, these floating frogs, and plenty of tikis. Yeah, I'll be perfectly frank, I'm not a big fan of the Tiki Tak tribe. I love that they're based on instruments, and the song they make to hypnotize animals for the bosses actually reflect on what they are. Whether they're a kalimba, maracas, a banjo, and even an accordion. But they're just kind of plain compared to the Kremlings. At least the Kremlings were varied in their shapes, colors, and even mannerisms. Most of the common tikis just look and behave so similarly that they just blend in. Only exception are the tiki torches. Their expression when you put them out is kinda cute. Also, what happened to the naughties? The zingers? Armies? Not even a Zubba? I mean, I guess there is this snake dude, but yeah, whatever. All of the enemies are completely new, and each world has its own collection of creatures, from the standard to the completely ridiculous. Look at this wonderful specimen. But I can't lie and say I miss the more grounded nature of the original Trilogy's baddies. Well, then again, Donkey Kong Country 3 had those buzzsaw bees, so I don't know what I'm talking about. But I'm not going to complain much. Most of them aren't too problematic. I'll elaborate on problematic in a bit. First, let's talk about the levels. The level tropes are pretty much what you expect from the original, though they do feel a little more generic. Like, all the tropes come from the original Country, with the addition of a beach level and a volcano level. Feels very new Super Mario Bros., doesn't it? The music is also fairly derivative of Country. Every level theme came back with new arrangements from the Metroid composer Kenji Yamamoto, which, you know what, I'm not too sour about. And the visuals, like, I shouldn't be surprised, this is retro after all, but when it comes to the Wii, damn, this game looks absolutely phenomenal. The amount of detail and particle effects are just on par with their previous works, without straying too far from the game's more zanier art style. And to whoever came up with these silhouette stages, I gotta give you props. Yeah, it only exists to be pretty, but damn it, I love how pretty these look. I love them so much, and I'm glad they came back for Tropical Freeze as well. Huh, that looks kind of familiar. The animation detail is also just a treat. With the environment moving along, some enemies having such expressive faces, the fauna and scenery just pop with a lot of squatch and stretch. It's all small little details, but I am all here for it. That's another thing these levels do perfectly. The secrets are just about as exciting to find as they were in the original Trilogy. Okay, finding hidden bonus rooms from breakable walls isn't really a thing in this game, which can be a good or bad thing depending on who you are. But the secrets still go by a similar playbook. Blast barrels and hidden rooms are still scattered throughout, and the goodies you get out of them are quite interesting. Now, about those goodies, the number of collectibles is nowhere near the amount that the Country games had. You do have the staple bananas, banana coins are back, light balloons now just look like regular balloons instead of decapitated monkeys. And of course, the Konga letters return as well, which actually perform differently. Instead of giving you an extra life, collecting them in every level of the world will unlock that world's Kong stage, the hardest level in the world. And most of them are, admittedly, some of my favorites in the game. Well, except Shifty Smashers, that one was kind of... eh. By the way, still cool how they tried to find some really fun level names like the original Trilogy. That's a great touch. Every single one of these levels is just a reflex and physics test, and damn, I just can't get enough of these. There's no bonus rooms to worry about, no Kong letters, just you and the end of the stage, with a lovely little present at the end. I won't exactly spoil what those presents do, that's for you to find out. Brambi actually returns as an animal buddy for a few levels, and he's still pretty fun to control, though he's the only one to return for some reason. Well, I guess Squawks is here too, but you can only buy him from Cranky's shop, and his purpose is to only find puzzle pieces. That's kind of a downgrade. Oh yeah, that's one new collectible I need to talk about, the puzzle pieces. Well, you just collect all of them in a level and you get some neat artwork. Not exactly glamorous, especially in the world of the internet. If they weren't fun to collect, they'd be nothing to write home about. Unlike the actual bosses, those are kind of a chore. I like the pirate crabs, they were kind of fun. And the fight with the mole train was a great way to make a platforming-heavy boss fight. The rest of them, not really. Mugly and Thugly tended to drag along, the corrupted bird fetus is a little chaotic, I know what I said. This worm thing was just far too easy. And then you have this asshole. His tells feel completely random, making a no-hit run practically impossible. But I soon realized that he was only the tip of the volcano. But before I go on with that, I should go on and talk about the vehicle levels to give some context. Now, the returning minecart levels are okay. There's even a variant that has you jumping out of the cart, though you have full control of your character in these, which can screw you over pretty easily. It is preferable to the regular ones, though, because if you get hit, you're done. Instant death. Like in the original Trilogy, the Kongs can still go on as long as you have both Kongs present. But in this game, the minecart says fuck the rules, even if you have both Kongs and full health. And that same sentiment can be said for the rocket barrel. Oh god. Yeah, did you like that rocket barrel in Country 3? Well, the good news is fuel is not a factor. That is literally the only upside. Trying to go down takes way too long and going up feels quick, which wouldn't be a problem if A, you can get hit from the terrain, hazards, and enemies, and B, you didn't have to worry about constant terrain, hazards, and enemies looking at you, you fucking cockbiter! You have to dodge the sound waves he shoots out, and since he tries to home on you, it can hurt your chances of gathering collectibles, including the- God damn it! Every one of these levels has a similar issue, that being putting the Kong letters in uncomfortable places, more so than most puzzle pieces. Hope that special level was worth it, you fucking masochist. And now we come to the final battle. And the war flashbacks are setting in. Now, writing this hazard to your physical and emotional health wouldn't be a complete ball ache if you didn't have to go through it every time you're fighting the final boss. Which sure, you technically don't. But if you die to the boss, you lose Diddy Kong, and if you used invincibility you bought from Cranky, it's completely gone because it's not renewable for each life like it was for the extra hit point or Squawks. I mentioned the invincibility too because fuck this fight! The first phase's attacks are way too quick, nearly impossible with Donkey Kong alone. The second phase's attacks are so cramped, and yeah, thanks for burning the hearts, motherfuckers. And actually hitting the head gets way too strict over time, and it really feels unfair at points. It's just a patience-testing slog of a fight. Not even the visual of the moon concussing it to death gives me enough serotonin to be happy. I'm just exhausted. And that's the problem. Returns is such a blast, even with the shitty rocket barrel and the lackluster boss fights. But it's soured by the final boss, and that always sucks, man. When a game is hitting all the right cylinders, only to fall off a cliff right at the end. And the thing is, the ending kinda makes me not want to recommend Returns. Not because the whole game is completely undermined, but at this point, it's also completely overshadowed by its own successor. With full transparency, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze isn't just a better Returns. This whole game is a contender for one of my favorite games of all time. Certainly in my top 5 favorite platformers at least. I'm not joking. When the game was announced, I knew I needed to get a Wii U. I love the original Trilogy, and while I didn't play Returns yet, at that time, I didn't care. It looked way better, it was lush and vibrant, with that song from the trailer being way too catchy for me to ignore. There were a lot of people, though, that were kind of pissed off that Retro were making yet another Donkey Kong game instead of continuing with Metroid Prime. And look, I love Metroid. I'm sure that's not a surprise to anyone. And while I wasn't a fan at the time, even if I was, I don't think I would have been too worried. Sure, Other M left a bad taste in everyone's mouth, and little would we know that we would be living through a serious drought. I wouldn't necessarily say that's Retro's fault. All they were making was Metroid Prime. They probably wanted to make something newer and fresher. And with Returns being a good appetizer, Tropical Freeze looked like it was set to be one of their finest achievements. Granted, that's hardly much of an accomplishment, thanks to the small catalog and insanely big reputation, but you get the idea. Now, when the game came out, people soon realized that this was a good call, as many would consider this just as good as Donkey Kong Country and Diddy's Conquest. And especially compared to New Super Mario U, Tropical Freeze was a masterwork. Even without that comparison, the game was taking everything that worked in Returns and tweaked what was promising. Very little was even removed, but there was one thing that was replaced. The Tikis tried, I'm well aware, but they got nothing on the Snowmans. And I'm going to sound blasphemous, these guys are a much bigger presence than the Kremlings were, mostly because they are a group of leaders rather than just one bad guy leading an entire group. K. Rool is great, no one is denying that, but you try to remember any of the bosses from the original trilogy, Donkey Kong 64, hell, even Donkey Kong Land. Most of them don't even have anywhere close to his iconography. The Snowman's leaders are menacing. They are all alone in their tirades over each island. One of them straight up evicted the Kongs out of their own home, which is something not even the Kremlin king himself could do. And damn, the fights are just great. Sure, they can stay a little too long, but they are just absolutely energetic with a lot of chaotic attacks that, while they can certainly kick your ass, are all the more satisfying to overcome. Also, why does the World 2 boss theme remind me of One Winged Angel? I kinda like that. But yeah, I should mention, David Wise actually came back to compose his soundtrack. But instead of replacing Yamamoto, they actually collaborated to create one of the best soundtracks in the series by a long shot. Having two of my favorite composers making music together is just a treat, man. Just get Nobuo Uematsu for the next game and that would be my dream collaboration. That would be excellent. And the music just enhances what are already exceptional levels. If Returns was heavily inspired by the original Donkey Kong Country, then Tropical Freeze was heavily inspired by Diddy's Conquest and Dixie's Triple Trouble. There is a lot of verticality present in this game, with plenty of levels bringing in high altitudes and multiple layers to the platforming to test your reflexes. And yeah, Returns had plenty of that, even had levels when you went to the background, which to be honest is kinda weird for a Wii game that had low resolution and all. But Tropical Freeze just goes beyond that, and now you can actually swim in this game, something you certainly couldn't do in Returns. Though for some reason you have an air meter this time, which I'm not completely against it, but it's like, they didn't have an air meter in the originals. Then again, Super Mario didn't have an air meter in the 2D games, and look at the 3D Marios. I guess it's a similar evolution of sorts. The swimming does feel fantastic though, way better than the original games, so that's not really much of an issue. I'm a little bummed out Ungar didn't return here, it's just the Rambi only show once again. I just want to know if he's okay, man. And Retro actually took a page from Super Mario World and gave us access to alternate routes, indicated by the magic portals. I love this so much, and it might just be me growing up with Super Mario World, and maybe the kids playing this will be confused like I did back then. But at least these levels are completely optional, only if you want to play those ball-bustingly hard Kong stages. Though in my opinion, they're actually not that difficult in comparison to Returns. Not only because the controls feel a lot better than they did in Returns, but you also have the ability to summon Diddy, Dixie, and Cranky to make the challenge a lot more manageable. It is completely insane that we have a playable Cranky Kong now. Even more crazy that he plays similar to Scrooge McDuck, with the Poké move making them impervious to spikes, giving you a vertical boost, and can even damage shielded enemies, which is probably not preferred in some of these stages. And he even has a more cheery attitude, like he's been waiting to get back into the action after 40 years. This gives me so much joy, good on him. A lot of people talk about how he and Diddy are completely outclassed by Dixie, since she has the ability to fly upward for a bit, but Dixie has the downside of having a heavy delay beforehand, giving Diddy an advantage despite not having any vertical versatility. And Cranky having that defensive moveset makes the platforming feel more creative and even makes the moveset much quicker than just a small flight boost. I'd even say Dixie is my least used of the three because of it, but she's still a fun addition, especially for newcomers that can use her special ability to get extra hit points. The special meter is kind of an interesting idea, having Diddy turning enemies into balloons, Dixie for extra hearts, and Cranky for banana coins, though I rarely used any of them since lives and banana coins are so common it's kind of overkill, though the extra coins could be nice if you need some handicaps for Now Funky's shop, or you can use them for the capsule machine. Considering I never used any of the handicaps aside from Squawks, this was where I put most of the coins into. And yes, I use Squawks a lot, not because I really needed him, despite the puzzle pieces being pretty hidden here as well. But when you do get a puzzle piece, he does this little dance now. That's 10 coins well spent for that alone. Yeah, I'm not kidding when I say this is one of the best games I've ever played. It takes games I'm very nostalgic for, and just improves the formula to a phenomenal degree. I'm having an issue trying to find things I straight up dislike, since the flaws for this game aren't really flaws, then they are just very small gripes. And hell, some of the stuff I hated in Returns were completely refined in this game. Like the rocket barrel and minecart having a health bar now. Yeah, eat shit, motherfucker! If I had to find something I'm not big on, it's the actual main honcho of the Snowmads, who's got all the presents in the beginning cutscene, but never gets any form of personality past that. Especially compared to K. Rool, who was menacing, but also kind of a silly goof. At least the fight itself is a good way to end the game. And the ending with them celebrating is just lovely. I would like for the Snowmads to return, and maybe have them team up with the Kremlings for the next game. I think that would be pretty neat. But I'm not sure when that's ever gonna happen. It's been almost a decade since Tropical Freeze was released on the Wii U, and all we got were a few DLC packs for other Mario games and a big role in the newest Mario movie, which is all good and well, but playing these games back to back made it so clear that Donkey Kong is just too special to be Mario's running mate. These games from childhood up to today still give me that sense of triumph, and Mario doesn't slack in that feeling either. But Mario relies on being safe and comfortable, and that's certainly the reason people gravitate to him in the first place. But Donkey Kong feels like it wants to challenge you with tight and expansive level design, while breaking you into these strange and breathtaking worlds, filled with out-there characters and bold, impressionable enemies. In a world where Nintendo is finally taking its own risk with the Switch, along with Metroid Dread, Breath of the Wild, hell, even Mario Odyssey to an extent, there's still some hope that Donkey Kong can come back into the spotlight and show the world that you don't need to keep it simple in order to have the best time of your life. But keep Payon out of it. We don't need them involved anymore. I am glad that Donkey Kong got a good starring role in the Mario movie, and that's a great first step, but in terms of video games, we need something bigger. A return for the Country series, a brand new 3D game, just anything other than a racing game. I don't want any more of that. Just anything, really. And whatever they give us, I'll be here to enjoy it, just like how I am going to enjoy this little banana. Yeah, there we go. You know, I was going to make a joke about how these used to be sweeter. And now this one's actually really good. I don't... What the hell?
So long comes...